You're listening to the B2B Revenue Executive Experience, a podcast dedicated to helping executives train their sales and marketing teams to optimize growth. Whether you're looking for techniques and strategies or tools and resources, you've come to the right place. Let's accelerate your growth in 3, 2, 1.
Welcome, everyone, to the B2B Revenue Executive Experience. I'm your host, Carlos Noche, and today we're talking about the power of human relationships in the era of AI sales. And to help us out with that, we have David Connors, CEO and co-founder of The Swarm, a new kind of go-to-network platform providing companies and investors the keys to their extended networks and the relationship data they need to accelerate sales, recruiting, and fundraising. David, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Carlos. Great to be here.
All right, David, to get us started, same question we ask everyone. What's something that you're passionate about that those that only know you through work might be surprised to know about you?
Well, something that takes up a lot of my time outside of work is I'm a dad to two young kiddos, two young boys. They're 6 months and 3 years old. And so I spend a lot of my time watching Bluey, the greatest Australian export that we've been watching a lot of. It's great.
Well, it sounds like you don't get a lot of rest.
No, that's right. Not a lot of sleep. Overrated.
They keep you young. That's a good part. So, David, tell us a little bit about your career and what got you here. What was your journey to success?
So, I'm from Australia originally, but I've been living here in the Bay Area almost 10 years. My last startup was actually acquired by Sequoia Capital. It was an outbound recruiting automation company. I started off in the growth world, so doing growth hacking, setting up inbound and outbound funnels and working directly with founders. They're like, actually, Dave, the biggest pain point at the moment is just hiring the engineers that we need to build a product before we can start selling it. So can we use some of these, growth tools and tactics on the recruiting side? I was actually using, outreach.io and doing outbound for recruiting. That got acquired by Sequoia. They wanted it in-house and were thinking about building something similar. And it was a really unique opportunity. So we took it. I was then a founder in residence there for a couple of years, building them other tools to increase the firm's productivity. And as I was doing that, ended up building this network mapping tool with the data science team and a bunch of other folks there internally. And that was the foundation for my latest venture called The Swarm, which helps every company to be able to map and then leverage their network.
Well, it's interesting because in this day and age of, I guess the flurry of AI conversations, it seems that we're focusing more and more on getting the human out of it. And when I first met with you, it's like, hey, it's really about human touch. It's really about this human connection. So I'm finding the topic interesting. What got you into this era, this focus on this whole human touch side and then using AI to enhance it?
So I think the way I see the world evolving is that there's going to be more AI assistance, more AI tools that will help to do the low value tasks that humans don't like doing and free us up to do the more high value tasks, which we're really good at. And in particular for the sales and kind of revenue function, I think there's a great piece actually by Mike Marg from Kraft, and he's just saying that there's like 1,000 micro interactions that happen in the sales end-to-end process, from the initial research and finding at the top of funnel, then all the way through to actually closing the deal. And there's no way you're going to just hand that over to an AI to handle the whole thing. There's too much trust that needs to happen, especially for higher ACV deals. So where is the human in this world of AI that's swirling around? And I think it's that every human, has this AI assistant, a little helper that can do a lot of this, sort of heavy lifting in the background. But at the end of the day, it's still going to be humans talking to other humans. If I'm, a buyer and I have some high ACV deal, my neck's on the line for this, this new product or service that I'm bringing in the org. I want to trust that who I'm buying from is a human that's going to be accountable. I don't want to just deal with a robot. So that's one sort of aspect of it. And then I think the other aspect is that as the proliferation of generative AI tools increase the noise in the ecosystem, the importance of human relationships is going to be more critical than ever, as people are going to want to learn and be educated from other humans, and that trust that exists. And there's even more, things we can talk about with the whole go-to-network playbook that we're putting together. That is the natural evolution from where we've come with the predictable revenue go-to-market playbook. But we can kind of dive into that later.
So, David, I couldn't agree with you more about this human-human connection. In fact, when people talk about, jobs being lost due to AI, I go, well, if your job is basically to push a button to send an automated email, you know what? You're not adding much value. Of course, your job's going to go away because you're not very productive. I mean, we can automate that. It's when the person actually responds back or you set up that phone call that I think that human to human connection is so valuable. Now, some people are telling me that, oh no, Carlos, we could listen to questions and responses and through AI respond accordingly. Is that human touch going away anytime soon?
I think there's some things that the AI is really good at, right? Which is like processing large amounts of data. And some sales roles historically have been focused on that, looking at web research, looking at reports that are coming out from companies, looking at news and sort of putting together this reasoning or this sort of understanding of this account. But that is a very limited part of the entire end-to-end sales job, right? And in particular, the entire revenue function. So there's some of these research and some of these activities that I think the AI assistants can help us with, but there's still a huge amount of the job that, in my opinion, isn't going anywhere.
And I think, I'm with you. I think, especially if we just look at the next 3 to 5 years to come, because sometimes I get people go, oh no, in 5 years, the roles are gone. I go, I don't know what's going to happen in 5 years. But in the short term, it doesn't feel like it. So let's go back to this go to network. What do you mean by go to network playbooks, or what does a go to network approach mean?
Yeah. So maybe taking a step back, the world that we've sort of come from, this sort of growth at all costs, zero interest rate policy, ZERP era, where you could kind of just throw more money at the problem and build this machine with more and more humans to increase the touch points of the org with your prospective buyers. And you just be scaling this up, the advent of these mass emailing tools and power dialers and the ability to really spray and pray your message onto the market and sort of saturate all of your prospective buyers. This has sort of reached this critical tipping point where then buyers' inboxes and voicemails were just flooded. I don't know about you, but I get all these messages all the time on LinkedIn. My inbox is just flooded with all these very undifferentiated, not personalized, cold emails, and I just delete them. I don't even look at them. So, what then happens after that, right? So then now money's got more expensive again. People have thinking through, how do we build these revenue orgs in a more efficient way? And we've got to be able to also do this in a way that cuts through the noise of all of these spray and pray tactics that are kind of out there. So the go to network approach looks at your relationships that sit around your company. So it's not just your team's networks, but it's also your investors, your advisors, your partners, your vendors and suppliers, definitely your customers, and then also things like the candidates you're talking to, the alumni at your company. And when you start thinking about all the different people that sit around your organization, there's actually a lot of networks that you can start tapping into. So the first step is just mapping that and just understanding, just revealing all the relationships you can tap into, and understanding what's the weak relationships with them, what's our strongest, closest supporters and allies, who are the besties of our firm that we can be really leaning on, and then thinking through, okay, what are the different use cases and how can we be leveraging those relationships in the most effective way? So a few examples, there's lots of different plays that you can do, but One classic example is, let's find some warm intro paths into our target accounts. So rather than saying we've got 1,000 accounts for the quarter, we're now just going to hit them with cold email, cold calls, and social touches. Instead, we're going to carve out the top 30, 40% where we actually have a pretty warm relationship into that account, maybe directly with our ICP, that is just one hop away. So we send an intro request to someone on our team who used to work with them, or to one of our investors, or to one of our customers, and it's a very easy ask for them. They make the the intro request. You then get introduced, and it's a 5 to 10x higher conversion to meetings than if you're going to go cold to that prospect, because you have the trust, the relationship is already there. You're not doing anything other than just leveraging the relationship. There's a bunch of other plays we can talk about, but that's just one to get us started.
That's a great one. And statistically speaking, a warm introduction is always much more effective than anything else, including a cold call. So part of our audience are people in these XDR roles. I said XDR because some people call them BDRs, SDRs. There's a million names for them. If I'm them, I'm listening and I go, hey, this is going to really affect, or this could really affect my role. How does your technology affect that business development function then within organizations?
Yeah. So I think they're the perfect person internally to be looking through all those warm intros and to be doing that identification of, hey, one of our investors is connected to one of these target accounts that I'm working on. So rather than going, cold with an email campaign, I'm going to then craft this nice message that's going to get sent to our investor. Maybe I ghostwrite it on behalf of our founder or CEO or on someone else. And there's different creative ways that you can actually engage these leads. It just takes a little bit of time. So that's a great way for an XDR to be able to use their time effectively. I think the second thing I'd say is start to build your own personal brand and audience. It's never too early to start this. And for every salesperson, every individual contributor, they should be thinking about, how can I build trust at scale with my prospective buyers? And this could be starting to write, on LinkedIn posts, doing some Twitter posts, writing some content, and talking in their, in their own network and their own community. And this is also a way, by the way, for sales managers to empower their team. Maybe build this into the KPIs, carve out some time for them every week to be doing this, and it's going to help the whole org to actually not just build their audience and build their network, but engage with the prospective buyers and build that trust at scale.
All right. So it sounds good. Do you have any success stories of people using this go-to network and what kind of results they've gotten?
Yeah. So, a good example is a startup called Ripe. They were looking at figuring out how to leverage their network, and they were doing the classic, using some mass emailing tools through some cold outbound, and joined the swarm to map their network, and then started leaning on their investors and their advisors. They've got a lot of these investors and advisors that weren't being utilized at all. They've 2x'd the top of their pipeline within the first couple of months, and they're on track to double that over the coming months as well.
Excellent. All right. So from my background a little bit, after I had my run in the ERP space, I switched over to the CRM space. And especially in the early days, my joke used to be like people would buy it, they couldn't even spell it. But in all honesty, the CRM space was great for my career and I learned a ton. But eventually the space kind of matured and, we really had to deliver a value prop. But one of the struggles that I still see today in CRM is delivering on that true relationship management. Is the swarm part of that evolution?
Yeah, it's a good way to put it. The R in the CRM was sort of missing from these, legacy CRM tools. Yeah, it's great as this shell of a system of record that you could enter all your data into, but it didn't really have a true representation of all the relationships of your firm, nor a good way to keep those strong and to be checking in and nurturing that network. So that's the next generation of CRM is what we're building, and there's a few other tools in the market as well who are helping to kind of bridge that gap. It's not just interactions with your customers and building a pipeline, but it's really the entire network that sits around your company and all the relationships that you have, which is just a lot more interesting for everyone rather than just doing data entry of logging your call notes. Then be able to see actually the whole firm's relationships is way more interesting to look at.
Yeah, there was I can't remember her name at the top of my head, so that's my bad. But it's network has really come up a couple of times on the podcast. But one of the lines that this one of our guests had was that your net worth is directly tied to your network. So is the swarm a way to really uncap the power of your network?
Yeah, it's a good way to put it. I think for some firms, the network could be actually the greatest asset that they have. This defendable moat that you can, leverage, that's proprietary, that's just for your firm, that your competitors can't imitate or compete with, especially when you build these authentic relationships with your buyers over a long term sort of game, and you're not playing these transactional short term sort of games, but instead you're building these deep authentic relationships. You're helping them by educating them, by building trust over time. And when they're finally ready to buy and they enter the market, and that 3% of the market, whatever, that's kind of ready, you're going to be the de facto number one pick in their mind. They've been hearing from you, they've been learning from you, and it's then your business to lose, so to speak.
Yeah, it's I want to double down on when you said authentic relationships, because I do think sometimes people are running so fast and so quick, especially on this hunt for revenue, that we become more transactional and we don't take the times to build personal relationship with folks. We don't take the time to understand not just the business outcomes for the company, but what are the personal outcomes for the individual? Because I believe if you make that linkage, you can create raving fans forever. So
Right.
not only someone that will renew and buy more from you, but hopefully will recommend you to 10 other people. Once I establish, I mean, will the swarm help me maintain those relationships in any way?
Yeah, it's a great point. Sort of from not just closing revenue and getting the customer in the door, but to actually converting them into an advocate and a champion of what you're doing, to refer in more business. And that's a great flywheel. As we're sort of building out the platform, I think that's something we're going to be definitely focusing on in the future. We're still early, we're still getting started, so we're just sort of focused on at the moment, mapping your network, figuring out those warm leads, plugging in your CRM and other tools that you use every day, piping the data where you want. And then in the future, we'll sort of then focus even more on that sort of nurturing the network, keeping those relationships really healthy and strong, and doing that in an authentic way, as you said. So looking forward to jamming more with you on that in the future.
I won't charge anything for my great ideas. The so you mentioned it earlier. There are other people that have tried this space before or that are trying it again in this day and age of AI. What has stopped folks from really making this successful in the past or doing, making it successful today?
Yeah, I've seen a few attempts of this in the past, and I think what I learned, and I talked to a lot of founders of these companies who attempted it, and investors, who may have invested in these previous dead bodies in the water as the investment. Um, I
Early
think
iterations.
exactly. Yeah, I mean, it goes back decade or more, but there's a few recurring themes. One is everyone appreciates the value and they understand the concept and the ROI of leveraging your warm relationships over going cold. It's just there's so much evidence and data that backs that up. The problem has been in the past that the data just wasn't there to be able to build this. Now, obviously, there's LinkedIn, and LinkedIn has evolved in their strategy where they've sort of moved away from being a place to manage and organize your relationships, which is kind of where it started off as. Now people are connected with thousands of people. Being a connection on LinkedIn isn't a true relationship. It's not a true signal that I have a relationship with someone. What it's formed into now is more of an audience building platform. And it's great for that function and that use case. But for those who want to actually have a good understanding of their relationships, it's pretty limited. Second thing is that LinkedIn isn't the only place where you have relationships. You have relationships in your email and your calendar. You have your previous colleagues that you've worked with. You have relationships offline as well. So there's not a unified platform that gives you this view of all of these relationships in one place. And in the past, the data just wasn't available to be able to do that. Second thing is with the recent GDPR and CCPA regulations, they've now broken open these gatekeeper platforms, which used to have the sort of stronghold on the user's data and wouldn't share it with anyone else. So we're able to leverage those recent regulations as well, which are also in our favor, trying to break open those gatekeeper platforms, allow the user to access their own data. And then finally, I think the depth of the data that's been available on previous platforms just hasn't been enough. It's been too shallow, and it's also been sort of too narrow in the use case. So with all those learnings, we've built the platform from the ground up with the latest data that's available, and we're kind of building on the shoulders of giants, so to speak, in terms of being able to take the best of LinkedIn and the best of some of these other platforms, like Salesforce and some of these other CRMs, and combine it into sort of next generation platform that our customers are really happy with. Yeah, we're working really hard to make it even better.
Excellent. All right. So, David, when we first met, I went out and I checked it out. So I'll give you my big personal concern. And again, you can call me old school because I am in some ways. And that's really about privacy and security. If when I look at this, a platform like yours, you're asking me to open up my private networks. So not only my LinkedIn, my email, my calendar. I mean, it seems like the more sources I give it, the better the data is going to be. But it also, let's face it, I'm partially paranoid here. I'm like, oh my God, I just gave you the keys to the kingdom. How do you deal with the whole privacy and security side?
It was a big question mark when we started this, which was like, are people even going to connect their accounts? Because we had those real concerns as well. And what we've learned is that it's less than 5% of users who are invited to the platform that decline to share their email and calendar, but almost everyone is comfortable sharing their LinkedIn because it's basically public anyway. If I'm connected with you on LinkedIn, I can see all your connections. People aren't that sensitive or precious about their LinkedIn connections anymore. And then the previous work colleagues that you have, again, is sort of publicly available information. You don't have that actually mapped anywhere. That's something that we offer as part of the platform, that we're able to pull all those previous colleagues for you. So it's actually quite a magical, delightful experience. And in terms of the email calendar, we're just focusing on work relationships. We're not going to send a message to your family or your grandma. She's not going to be on the platform. So that's another way. And then there's more fine-grained privacy and security controls, and we're building this in a very secure way that's just your own private curated database of your relationships. It's not shared with other users or anything like that. So we've jumped through a lot of compliance hoops with a lot of very security conscious customers, and we've been able to pass and fulfill all of their requirements, which has been great.
Now, in a work environment, for example, if we all work together for an organization, a startup, if you will, we'd be asking our board members, our investors, our executives, our employees to all come together as a swarm, I guess. Did I understand that right?
Yeah, that's right.
And even though we're sharing some email and stuff like that, when you're looking at some of the stuff, you're not looking at people's emails, you're just looking at the connections that they're making with folks.
Correct. Yeah. So we're not actually reading any of the body of the emails or any of the subject lines or any of the private or sensitive information that's included in the inbox, which, that was a deliberate, intentional decision to allay those concerns, as you said, especially when you're getting these external networks on, so where investors are joining, advisors, but we have folks who've invited all of their customers in, and those are some of the richest networks, and you want to make sure that they feel comfortable joining. The other thing you can do is also add the work overlap connections without requiring a user to sign up. So this has been our latest innovation called the AI Network Mapper, and it pulls from our own database of 800 million profiles, and we can see the employee graphs of every company, who worked with who at the same time, how long was the overlap, was it a month, was it 2 years, was it the same function, the same location. There's a lot of intelligence that goes behind the scenes into calculating those work overlaps and ranking everyone by the connection strength score. But we can do that for everyone at the company without needing them to sign up. So that's a really great way to sort of get started. You can kind of seed your company's relationship graph with all these work relationships, and only takes a few seconds. It's very quick for us to do that now.
That's awesome. Yeah, I would think like, and this is, I guess, getting nitty gritty, but it'd be kind of interesting to be like, hey, David, it looks like you emailed this person about 6 months ago. I don't know what it was about, but the last connection you had with them was back then. It doesn't have to be about buying their company or anything secret like that, but it could at least know the how recent the connections are. Is that a fair use case?
It can be, yeah. We don't display that data actually on the platform. We're intentionally again not showing the sort of the number of interactions, recency, that kind of stuff. It's more just like, Carlos, have you been in touch with this person? Yes. Are you also connected on LinkedIn? Yes. Did you used to work together? And all these different inputs just sort of flowing together. It's an interesting idea. Some customers want to have more detailed interactions, the frequency and recency in the inbox. So maybe we'll give that option for folks in the future. But again, we're just a small team, and we have to prioritize what we're building. So maybe in the future.
I understand that. Yeah, the frequency and recency sounds like it would be interesting, right? Because then if you think down the line, it's like, hey, I haven't talked to this person in a year, or I haven't talked to this person in 5 years. I just pinged an old colleague of mine. We worked together over 16, 17 years ago.
Wow. Yeah.
The only thing that let me that I talked to him 2 years ago was when I messaged them over LinkedIn. I could see when the last time was that I messaged them.
Nice. Yes, that's a
So,
good
but
idea for that sort of personal network management. I like that. Being
I
able
got
to
it's a whole
set
new module
reminders.
to your system.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense. We're sort of focused on companies at the moment, but we're going to be expanding into the individual personal network management use case in the not too distant future as well. So
It,
keep those
it
ideas
might
coming. I like it.
it might open you up to the whole B2C side. I mean, I think about my sweetheart who's in real estate. She's got a whole network to manage. You think about people in insurance or other financial services type functions, they have a network to manage.
Yep.
And
That's right.
if they could pull it all together, it'd be a nice asset for them, especially as they move from company to company.
Yep. That's exactly the intention, that you should have your own swarm map. You can take it from company to company. And, it's not just a fit for tech companies. We have a lot of other industries and other folks who are using as well, from higher education to consultancies to financial services to even some construction and other folks. So it's the same kind of concept across industries. Let's leverage our network, find warm intros, and then that's going to be a much more effective, but also more delightful way of doing business rather than spray and praying everyone that I know.
All right. So given the state of the product today, and I know it's growing and getting better, what would for companies that'd be interesting in trying it out, what would be some of the first steps you'd recommend for them in connecting their networks?
Yeah. So, step one is map your network, right? So you can get all of the relationships that your firm has access to, both your internal networks, but then also your investors, advisors, customers, partners, suppliers, everyone, anyone you can think of that might want to help you out. And again, you don't necessarily have to invite them all into the platform. You can map their network using the AI network mapper, and pull all their work connections on their behalf without notifying them that they need to sign up or do anything, which is great. And then I think the second thing is just this sort of mind shift change of how you define your ICP. I'd sort of say, it's not just about these like customer fit signals and demographics, as well as these intent signals, but there's also this relationships aspect, which can then help you to prioritize your targeting, and then carving out the warm target accounts, and then engaging your network and your relationships to help you to set up more meetings and to close business faster.
All right, David, you got me. I'm gonna go fish around. I'm gonna go back in there and fish around some more. I started it. I didn't go very far. I got all. I got a little freaked out about the whole security thing, and I knew I was going to talk to you today. So I'm gonna go jump my toe with my big toe in the water. So, David, in researching you, hey, you've had a great background, and one of the big things I believe about in the podcast is people learn from other people and their stories. So here's, in closing this out, I got a couple of questions for you. What might have been one of the biggest missteps or challenges in your career where you learned the biggest lesson?
I think for me as a leader and as a business owner, when I first got started, I was trying to just do too much by myself. And I think this is a trap that a lot of early stage founders fall into, where I was doing everything, all the operations, all the HR, the finance, the bookkeeping, because I didn't want to pay anyone else to do it. I was really
Right.
scrappy, right? But then I was spending 50% or more of my time on these pretty low value tasks, and I was busy, but it was busy work. It wasn't really the highest leverage way to use my time. So I think like as I've got more experience and some more reps doing this, I really think like, how can I outsource almost everything? Either delegate it to someone internally, delegate it to a contractor, just automate it if I can, or just entirely remove it. There's a great Harvard Business Review article, the sort of magic of getting things done. Recommend that. Just have a look at sort of these different ways to manage your time. But that's a big trap that I see other founders fall into, is just not outsourcing and delegating fast enough and trying to do too much yourself. And by the way, you don't burn out, and you don't, and your wife will be happy with you as well.
I have the same challenge, David. In fact, I just finished this book on vacation called 10X. And it's kind of like, going from 1X to 2X, the idea, if you want to go from 1X to 10X, you really got to do less and do more with the time you do have, right? Kind of really focus on the things you're good at. So I haven't figured it out yet, David, but I'm trying. So I think that's a real good one. All right. Last question. We call it Acceleration Insights. What might be that one piece of advice, be it business or personal, that you would share with our listeners that would help them, maybe grow their careers and maybe be as successful as you have been?
I think, for me, it sort of comes back to this topic of relationships, right? And just try to be more intentional and authentic with the relationships you're building and have this long-term view. It's just a bit of a mindset shift, but think in terms of decades that we'll be working with people versus just the next few months. And rather than trying to just hit, next quarter's quota, think about how it can be working with this person over many different companies over the rest of our life. And it just sort of opens up a lot of interesting opportunities and a lot of other kind of win-win creative opportunities as well.
Excellent. So, David, if people wanted to get in contact with you and learn more about yourself or the Swarm, what might be the best way for them to engage with you?
I'd say probably on LinkedIn, pretty active there. Try and post regularly with my latest thoughts. So connect with me on LinkedIn, and the Swarm is also on LinkedIn as well. So we can put a link in there.
Excellent. I can't thank you enough for being a guest today. Great insights. I really enjoyed our conversation.
Thanks again, Carlos. It's been great chatting with you.
All right. Well, to close us out, everyone, that's it for this episode. Please check us out at www.b2brevexec.com, or just check us out on your favorite podcast platform, be it Spotify or Google or iTunes. And I'm Carlos Noche. Until next time, I wish you nothing but the greatest success.
You've been listening to the B2B Revenue Executive Experience. To ensure that you never miss an episode, subscribe to the show in iTunes or your favorite podcast player. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time.